Well, good morning, Waspeteers. It's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe and other obligatory statements that you are expecting to hear YouTubers say at the beginning of their videos. I had been planning on doing a video talking a bit about Palladium books beyond the supernatural, and I still intend to do that, but had a comment on a video yesterday that got me thinking a little bit. And so I just wanted to make a video, kind of like a general remembrance of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Now, the comment was not directed at me, or at least I didn't interpret it that way. So if you're seeing this and you recognize that I'm talking about your comment, hi, and this isn't some personal, fuck this guy, and it's not at all. I'm actually kind of somewhat agreeing, but kind of wanting to explore further the notion of whether or not a lot of the YouTubers who are, as of late, complaining about new 5th edition products, whether or not that is born out of some sort of hatred for Dungeons and Dragons. Albeit, certainly there probably are a handful of cynical YouTubers who are purely just doing that kind of stuff for clickbait. To agree, I'm kind of almost up to the edge of it, because I like 5th edition is functional. It's a very functional, good game. And of the various editions of D&D, it's the D&D that I have run the most as a DM. I mean, shit, there's a time where, like, it's the only game in town, so to say. Right after it came out, if you went on to meetup.com or whatever, internet, link up site you use to find gamers, it'd be the only game that you can get responses off of. Try to post like, hey, who wants to play Rifts? Crickets. Anybody want to play World of Darkness? Crickets. Anybody want to play Call of Cthulhu? Crickets. Hey, you want to play D&D? Oh shit, suddenly you got more responses than you have room at your table for. And so you're having to suddenly like tell people no, they can't come and play with you. Which generally was, like not the rule of early 21st century role-playing games. Now, in terms of critical things, my biggest problem with 5th edition is that at higher levels, I think it gets a bit wonky and cartoony and a bit hard to write for, especially ahead of time. If you notice, going just over all the published 5th edition adventure source books, with maybe the exception of like Rise of Tiamat, like none of them really get up to the top tier levels. I mean, they're almost all set for levels 1 through 10. Maybe Curse of Strahd might be a high level, although they recommend it for a lower level than what matches a lot of the challenge ratings in that, and so you're having to rely heavily on giving people really potent magic items in order for them to be able to defeat Strahd, if they're before 10th level or anything like that. Like in some ways that should be like a mid-range, adventure for characters who are already 10th to 15th level before they even start that one. That should be a big campaign finisher, not necessarily your starting point or like an early destination for your adventures. I guess the leveling kind of period has like, it's not so much the leveling, it's the challenge ratings maybe that the way if you follow the instructions as they're kind of writ out in the Dungeon Master's Guide, you end up having like a Skyrim kind of issue where the monsters are constantly ratcheting up in intensity as the player characters get better in skill, and so they're kind of always stuck at the same balance point, which, I mean, like, there's the angle where, yeah, you want to keep the challenge there for the players, but that it should tell people that they need to occasionally pump the brakes on things and allow the players to experience the joys of fighting the low-level monsters that they struggled with at first as higher-level characters. Go from the, like, when you're first level and you're just barely hanging on by a thread, taking out a couple of orcs or goblins or kobolds or humans or whatever your villain du jour of the day is. But, like 5-6 levels later, they're suddenly cutting through whole swaths of these guys with ease. Like, it's fun for players to get a chance to experience that kind of stuff. And plus, keeping them, kind of more focused on the lower level stuff just for the grind helps slow down that level progression. And then you can save the higher challenge rating stuff for keystone NPCs and monsters and foes and that kind of thing. But Yeah, like at high level, it gets kind of weird, but like how many people even get up past 10th level? I believe there was some marketing research done in the last year that said like the vast majority of campaigns fall off before they hit 10th. So in many ways, like levels 11 through 20 are just kind of superfluous. They're there if you want them, but don't like honestly actually expect to get there because most people just don't really have the patience to maintain a story narrative for that long. Um, I mean, do you remember there was like those early days of D&D when like it was exciting to have this as a source book where this was the big hot commodity, was this thin little printout you can get from Drive Through RPG for like $5 or whatever it was. And like those were the good days. Like my original loadout of books I had when I first started running 5th edition was just the Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, DMG, this, and the Curse of Strahd adventure module, which I didn't even actually run Curse of Strahd as Curse of Strahd. I was just pulling resources out of it and putting it into a homebrew world. As time has gone along, I've gotten kind of more of an idea of like their design ethic there, which like my negatives of D&D is too much emphasis on adventure modules, next to no actual like setting fluff books. It kind of forces you, if you actually really want to understand the world of Faerun or Eberron or any of these other settings, that it kind of forces you have to go back onto Drive Through RPG and find PDFs and or printable versions of old AD&D source books and whatnot, and so you can actually find out what the fuck's going on. The Sword Coast doesn't really describe enough of the Forgotten Realms world, and there several adventure modules are kind of framed almost like there's a little bit of a mini setting source book kind of quality to them, but they don't really flesh any of it out, so you can just kind of use it generically. And then their non-Forgotten Realms settings, like you're lucky to get the one book, and there's like little in the way of support material for it. So, but that has like nothing really to do with whether or not the game's good or not. Mechanically, it's fine. I mean, it's hands down like the most polished version of D&D ever. Like you might say some things where like you kind of miss the like racial negative modifiers like they had in AD&D, or a slightly more intricate skill system like they had in 3rd edition, but like I mean, those could be cool, but they're not really necessary for the functionality of the play. And just by virtue of the fact that so many people have played it, so many people have had a good time playing it, for such a period now that I mean, we're going on half a decade of having this thing around. That clearly you can't say that this is a broken, fucked up, stupid game. I think the real problem with D&D right now is it's going through its normal cycle of we're just reaching the point where it's kind of childish. Unfortunately, in the the year 2020, 2021, childish carries some baggage with it that wasn't there in like say the 90s. All the great controversy about whether or not D&D 5th edition has become woke, I would kind of argue that it was probably woke from the get-go, before that even became a term that people decided they started to want to throw around so casually. And even some of the quote-unquote woke things that have been done to it, like the idea of using monster races in a more nuanced fashion where they're not always the bad guys. I mean, shit, that's not like a new idea at all for game masters to be encouraged to try to do. You go back to when I was a kid in high school. I mean, there was hints of that all around the place. There's like the Swamp Light adventure for AD&D, where the big twist is that the lizard folk that you're out to find are actually not the bad guys. It's actually some Rakshasa out in the jungles who are framing them for stealing this idol. Or you have the Palladium fantasy, which quite explicitly makes all sorts of like classic monster races as playable races, and makes a point of saying that while their cultures might be brutal and blah blah blah, they are still each individual people with their own individual choices and their own individual ways to actualize themselves. And so it's possible to have an orc hero, and it's possible to have an elf villain, and all that kind of stuff. So those sorts of things don't bother me. the idea that like they have all these like new races for D&D that are like based on animals. Uh, while some of the people who have embraced that might have done so in a slightly distasteful way, since because of modern internet culture, there's this kind of furry angle going on with some of that. On its face, in principle, I don't mind animal races either. I'm of like the personal opinion that some of us might be a little bored with just elves and orcs and goblins all the time. Maybe you want some more exotic kind of races going on in your fantasy world, and just without pulling something that's way too obscure from human mythology for people to really like get where you're talking about without a lot of exposition dump, or just making up something weird off the top of your head. Animal peoples of various types are an easy concept for players to understand. You can tell someone they see a lion guy, and just because of that, their own inner impressions of what lions are like, they're already going to start to kind of fill in a lot of the blanks of how lion dude is going to act, kind of a thing. So, like I said, if anything's ruining that stuff, it's some of the players who've embraced getting to play elephant people and owls and two different varieties of Catman and all that kind of stuff. But like it's in and of itself, it's not a bad thing. The problem as of late is like some of the wishy-washiness of the rules, the constant this long slow degradation of where D&D used to be in terms of like if you want to play a human, you just get your flat ability score rolls. If you want to play an elf, sure, you get the bonus to the thing, but you also have to deal with taking the negative to this other thing, so it kind of creates a little bit of a balancing act where you actually got to consider what you want to do. And now it's just everything's bonuses. Bonuses everywhere. All races just get bonuses, 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 bonuses. And humans, because, well, like, why on earth would you want to play human with just flat attribute rolls when all the other races get +2 to one thing and +1 to another thing? So they just give humans bonuses to everything. Which means that the human average is higher than the average of all the other races, which kind of subtly makes humans like a supremacist race within D&D. But let's not go there. Now the thing, as of Tasha's Cauldron, and they've slipped it into like other books like Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, is you get to just choose where you put your attribute bonuses. Just put them wherever you want. Everyone gets a +2 and a +1. Or you can... Don't let me like try to tell you how to make your character. You can put 3 +1, so just please don't hurt me. Kind of a thing going on. Which, like, why even bother? Like, if everyone gets the exact same attribute bonuses, then why even have the attribute bonuses? If you see what I mean, like, all characters should just be based on 3d6 for all their ability scores. You can kind of tweak that if they wanted to by just making it that your carrying capacity and some other effects of how those attributes function might alter based on the scaling of your character. Like a halfling with a strength of 18 and a human with a strength of 18 are strength 18 relatively speaking to their race's settings, but they wouldn't be on the same level with each other because the halfling is only like a third of the fucking mass of the human. So obviously there's going to be like some difference in their ability to like leverage their body strength to be able to move things and all that kind of stuff. But that's potentially like a level of realism that they don't want in a game that's supposed to be fairly streamlined in terms of how it runs. So, I just like the fact that I mean, I kind of get like each character should be something kind of individual kind of thing, but it also sets it up where you can have just jarring things going on in your games that really can just like shatter people's immersion and such. When you have like halflings and kobolds with a strength of 20 running around in your setting, because you're allowing that kind of character creation to go on. And then there's also like I'm not sure how much D&D themselves have been on the consent rules train and how much of that's just bubbling up from the newer gamer culture. But I think really the problem that D&D has and why so many people are turning on it is less so much the things that they're doing, albeit there are some things going on elsewhere in the culture politically that are kind of fracturing people into different camps and kind of will frame things for people who automatically associate this with what they define as their opposition camp. And so you'll tend to kind of filter everything you're seeing from it through that lens. But I guess how to put it best. I think I need more coffee. The problem is the arrogance. The vaguely insulting way that they've gone back on Drive-Thru RPG and put all these disclaimers and all their classic products that, oh my God, back in the day when they were writing AD&D, they were so racist and sexist. It was horrible. Everything, all the writers, all the settings, 24/7. It was just this roiling, heaping, steaming mass of misogyno-racial Islamophobia. It's insulting to the people who made all those products. It's insulting to the people who played those products. And it's a lie because, if I keep coming back to the thing, of like, if all this stuff was really so bad and so like founded by bad people, then why the fuck are they making it at all? If all, Wizards of the Coast controls those PDFs of the old products on Drive-Thru RPG, and they don't mind making money selling them, but they want to like poke at you for having liked this thing once upon a time. They want to remind you, just in case. I mean, what if some young kid, picked up a copy of Forgotten Realms, Elminster's Guide to Ecologies, and then they thought that they couldn't grow up to be a fireman or president. It's a level of like just unnecessary hand-wringing, and it's disingenuous because they're still selling the fucking things. So if they really thought they were that bad, they would just take them down entirely, wouldn't they? Why are they making them available? Oh, because they're writing slightly unfinished products. Very highly polished, but unfinished products. And so you still need that old information to be able to fill in all the blanks that they didn't address. And it all comes across as just an attack. The people who are making a lot of negative videos, I'm sure there's a few cynical YouTubers who are doing it purely just for clickbait. But the majority of them, like myself included, I've done a few videos, in the last month, like kind of poking at the bear with, like Fizban's Treachery of Dragons and Mordenkainen's Tome of Hate Speech. But that's not born out of a fear, hatred, and loathing of Dungeons and Dragons. It's born out of essentially a love of the game and a disappointment and what it's kind of turning into. It's becoming lackluster. It's becoming predictable. It's becoming preachy, and and also just all these years on, enough with the fucking adventure modules. We need some actual setting books. Your setting books suck. But no, instead, we're also now entering this period of time where D&D 5th edition is dead, actually. I'm not sure how many people really conscious of that yet, and what I mean is the second they announced that D&D Evolution was on the way, then why buy any more 5th edition stuff? This isn't a game system that's no longer going to be supported soon. So why invest any more money in buying these things? Because unless it's just for completionists, because you've already got so much. It's in some ways, the way some of the people are reacting in terms of the people who are being negative towards 5th edition, it is very reminiscent of a jilted ex-lover, an ex-husband after a bad divorce, or an ex boyfriend or girlfriend after a really bad breakup, who still just is constantly just talking shit about their ex and hates them, they're bad, they suck, blah blah blah. But anytime they're like somewhere around, they'll be peeking around the corner to see what they're up to, and if their ex notices them, they'll be like, "Ah, oh, fuck you, cunt." But they can't let go. And I kind of feel like in some ways that's kind of what's going on with some of this D&D stuff. It's people who need to just walk away and just like put it out of their mind. There's a shit ton of other role-playing games. And unlike 5 years ago when 5th edition first came out, over the last year, there's been a boom in interest from people about actually wanting to play other games. And so you're no longer wed to having to run D&D if you want to find players. But it's hard. It's hard to, like, when it's something you cared about, like, is, coming across as if it's actively insulting you and in favor of some just rather crass and cringy people. I don't want, like, in terms of like factioning, I kind of like describe myself in internet terms as being someone who's both woke and red-pilled at the same time. There's a lot of stuff that on paper, philosophically speaking, I still agree with from the left that I would like to see manifest. My problem is the cringy ass, short-sighted, bad behavior that's displayed by a lot of the modern left that is not productive, and this is kind of a sign that, like, a lot of these people have, like, chosen a team and are saying the words, and they've wrapped themselves up in a cloak of political philosophy that I would think I would agree with, but they don't act as if they actually carry the principles they preach. So I'm not just going to, like, play along with them just because they're dressing up in a suit I like. And so it puts me more in, like, kind of a natural bedfellow kind of thing in terms of how, like, internet interaction with folks. And I empathize with the gamers of my generation and older, who, as I say, like, they're being insulted by this thing that they've loved their whole lives, and they still want to like it. They still want to be able to enjoy this thing, but now they're being told that they're bad, and they're bad for liking it, and their way of playing it is bad. And so go figure that they turn and start to bitterly tear down any little flaw they see in it. That's kind of naturally, you're kind of asking for it. I'm not sure, like, how much of this negative marketing thing is intentional or not. Is it the way to, like, get the kids to think the thing is cool is by getting the older generation to, like, not like it? Because it's like I'm not sure how well that actually works. With all the stuff with, like, the Star Wars: The Force Awakens, the attitude from the Star Wars fan culture where it became so divided and, like, spiteful after The Last Jedi. I'm just not sure how attractive that is to new fans. I also just the message of, like, come play our thing or come enjoy our thing. Our fan base is full of a bunch of terrible rapists and racists. Don't you want to come be one of them? Like when you're constantly bad-mouthing your fan base, I don't see how that's supposed to get people to want to join your fan base unless they end up being the people's like, what? Rapists and racists play this thing? Well, I guess I better get in on that, like all this, the stuff with the consent rules, like I said, 5th edition, I can't really call that they've done too much of that. But some other games, Modifius has dabbled for sure that I've seen, and putting, like, consent stuff in the actual physical book, which is also, like, it's a bit preachy, and it only really does, the only thing it does is just undermines the game master's ability to think fluidly, because they're going to be constantly second-guessing themselves. I saw something on Twitter yesterday of someone asking if they can have, like, does anyone know where there's a fillable out form for game consent? And it's just, like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, why is D&D and role-playing games, the thing that has the most pre-built consent in it. I mean, it's just imagine. It's not just like how far are we gonna take this? Is it gonna come down to like, the order of combat? Okay, ask all your players if they consent to be in combat. Then roll initiative. Determine order of initiative. Ask your players if they consent to having the goblin attack them before the goblin attacks. And then just sit there as the game completely stalls out, because who the hell's going to consent to having their character attacked? Role-playing games are based on tension. That's part of the excitement that keeps you coming back, is the tension of losing your character. The people complaining that D&D is shifting towards trying to promote more dialogue-based ways to get through role-playing games. Once again, like having good guy orcs and lizard people in the mix, having the option to resolve an encounter without fisticuffs or swordplay is fine. However, if you shift it entirely over to that, you need to replace something that stands in place of the hit points and the threat of combat damage, so that you maintain this tension that if the characters fuck up, or if the players fuck up, they might lose their character. Which is why I've designed the rules of my games the way they have, because in and out of combat, your character is still fragile and can be lost just from getting into too bad of a verbal argument and just having their morale shredded or something like that. It maintains then the tension of dialogue scenes, so that they're just as like iffy as throwing yourself into a hole full of alligators. So, but yet, as I say, all the complaining about what's going wrong is really just kind of more of a fuck you than I think it really is like super legitimate. If D&D hadn't or maybe even not D&D itself, if the people working for Wizards of the Coast online haven't been such shits, and if the crop of players that they were catering to now weren't such fucking little shits, there would probably be far less complaints about how woke D&D's become. Because, like, I think, as I said earlier on, like, 5th edition was arguably woke from the get-go. It's marginally slightly more woke than it was at the beginning, but not by a huge margin. And, like, in and of itself, like, those aren't bad things. Like having more options as a game master is always good. I mean, you want to have, like, lots of different ways to resolve things, because players sometimes come up with stuff that you're not necessarily thinking of when you're originally designing your outline for your session. And so, like, having backup plans of other ways to get around situations is good. It's all part of your toolkit. The arrogance, like, just in flatness, though, is just the idea that in these books can actually tell us to do anything as dungeon masters, or even players. Like screw you. We bought your overpriced book full of rules that we probably could have gotten just a summary of online somewhere for free, and have just come up with our own fucking setting. But you wanted the polished product, you want the nice books, you want the nice art, all that kind of stuff. You want the prestige of running Dungeons and Dragons. But like, they can't tell us what to do. I mean, we own the books, we run the games. This isn't a video game. You don't have any control of it after it leaves the house. We're allowed to ignore all we want out of these books. As in part, well, I come down to, if you really, I would like to say, if you listen carefully to the videos I've made on, some of the more recent D&D's rule books, I feel like my general, like, baseline bedrock thesis about all this is that it's much ado about nothing, because these games are inherently mutable, and you can do whatever you want with them, meaning like their efforts to tell us how to behave, you can accept that if you want, or you can run exactly in the opposite direction. They can't stop you. The consent rules in your copy of Fallout, the role-playing game, aren't going to pop out and choke you and slap you around if you don't follow them perfectly. The text on orcs and Volo's Guide to Monsters isn't going to hop out of the book and start slapping you around and calling you a racist in front of everyone if you don't run orcs exactly the way it tells you to run orcs. It's up to you. Wizards of the Coast isn't going to send stormtroopers into your home. Arguably, maybe if you're playing online, doing like live streams on Twitch or something, like you then might be subject to like their rules of conduct for having live streams. But that's more about that site and less about the role-playing game itself. So, and like, it cuts both ways. Like, you know, you have a game that you don't think is woke enough, you can woke it up. You want to run a game that's like nothing but like, that has all cis-het white males as bad guys and you're playing non-cis characters, go for it. Who cares? It's your fucking game. It's your time. Yeah, fuck. You want to use Call of Cthulhu and like reenact the rape of Nanking in World War II? I mean, like, you're a weird fucking person, but go for it. You know, that's kind of part of the problem, though, of like all the consent form shit, is that, you know, like there's a part of me that would say, like, you know, if you need me to actually fill out paperwork to consent to playing in your game, that makes me think that you're doing some insanely fucked up shit in your game that you probably shouldn't be doing at all, and that's why you're having to have people like legally sign away their right to complain or sue you about it. Like what the fuck are you doing? Like, people don't consent this much to anything. You know, like is D&D like more intimate than sex? I mean, like, let's all chill the fuck out, people. I'm just gonna end it off with like something I said on Twitter this morning. It's just like most of this shit is eye rolling. I see it on both sides, but the majority of the eye rolling shit does seem to be coming from the leftist millennial camp. But not that there's nothing there on the right. That would be false. But I feel like too many people have bought into all the hype and salesmanship around these games. They are not high art. They're not high theater. They are not a fucking door to Narnia. It's not the key to unlock your imagination or any of that kind of shit. It's just a way to kill a little time while you're stuck here on planet Earth with the rest of us. And that's it. Everyone just needs to calm the fuck down. But like D&D 5e is fine. One day we'll look back on it fondly through rose-colored glasses while we're all making videos about, you know, D&D Evolution 2.0's terribly woke source books where, you know, they're giving you advice on how to have AI bots play characters in your game and not to mistreat them, you know, because AI algorithms are people too, or something like that. I don't know. As with any of these videos I occasionally make where I have literally just woke up and I'm trying to drink my coffee still while making it, I'm probably a bit all over the place in terms of things, so thanks for sticking around through all this. Hit like and subscribe. Leave comments below. Go on DriveThruRPG and search up Total Party Skills and find something you like and buy it. I don't use Patreon or any of that kind of stuff, so it's like your only way to support this channel is to buy one of my products. I don't overcharge. So, get going, you little scamp.